So I wanted to start off by this really heartwarming quote. If the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, then we would be so simple that we couldn't. Very, very true, right? But just like anything in life, there's always a flip side. And other people say, especially in business, anything we can measure, we can control. So that's the entire theory behind the brain-machine interface. The main principle here is the bioelectrical activity of neurons, because when a neuron fires, we know that there is a voltage change that goes across the neuron. It's about 100 millivolts, and that can be read by a variety of different devices. The way AI and ML play in here is they decipher all that noisy language or all that noisy data that we end up getting, and they make sense out of it. So we can see what we're trying to do, and it organizes that data for us. But there are two objectives here. There are two ways we can use this type of theory. One is to control signals outside of the brain, and that's going to something like a neuroprosthetic device or to a robotic surgical device, like Fred was saying. And then the other route is to control signals back into the brain. Mind control. There are two ways we do this: wearable devices or implantable devices, and we're going to delve into both. Let me just stop here for a second. So are we really talking about things that are that far-fetched? Because I would urge you to think about if you could also be a cyborg yourself. And these are the questions you should ask yourself. You might be a cyborg if you can ask Google a question and come up with an instant answer. We all can, right? You can access any book, any movie, any song with the click of a button. You might be a cyborg if you can video chat with someone across the world for free. You might be a cyborg if you can broadcast communications to millions of people. I should add there that you might be a cyborg if you can have the Academy meeting or an accelerator meeting virtually in 2020. But the point here is that our phones and our devices are really all just tools, and they're moving information from the environment into our brains and from our brains back out into the environment. They're just conduits. And that's the same thing that we're talking about. This is an old story. We've gone from things like mainframe computers, and every year it gets smaller and smaller and more mobile until we're all going to be walking around with neural implants very soon. But again, I would urge you to think, is it really that far-fetched? Because we've had brain-machine interfaces for a very long time. We just don't think of them that way. I mean, let's look at the deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease. This has been FDA approved for decades and used for decades, and it works. I mean, the theory here, you stick an electrode in and you stimulate the basal ganglia, and lo and behold, that patient starts moving properly again. And it's beautiful to see, and it's insane because it works really well, and we've had this for a very long time. Cochlear implants are now getting much more mainstream. Control of artificial limbs or neuroprostheses, spinal cord stimulators, and of course, retinal implants. So these are the cybernetics specifically for ophthalmology, and I broke these up into two broad categories. The one on the left is the AR, VR, and wearables category, and then on the right, the implantable devices and biosensors. And we've actually seen instances or companies that had all of these types of technologies today, which is why this meeting is so unique. But if we turn our attention to the AR, VR, and wearables category, we have diagnostics and AI-based therapeutics. And this is what Fred was talking about. Hiru was founded by one of my colleagues at Bascom Palmer, Dr. Mohammed Abushusha, and he's using his software on a device like the Microsoft HoloLens, for instance, to do things like measure the amplitude of eye movements, do automated visual field testing, very quick and easy, refraction, photography. But there's a second component to that. And I think this is the real game changer when we're talking about cybernetics. There's AI-based therapeutics involved here. So if the device takes the photos, then the algorithm fills in the blanks. So imagine a patient with glaucoma visual field defect, AMD, stroke visual field defects, like a homonymous hemianopsia or something like that. And imagine using MI to fill in the blanks so that now the patient wears the device and can see the world with those visual field defects corrected. It's unbelievable. So that's definitely a company to watch and something that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, a lot more in the future. Going to implantable devices and biosensors, we've seen some of these today. For drug delivery, there's VEGF inhibitors, antivirals, which we've used for a long time, like ganciclovir implants. The implantable biosensors for continuous IOP monitoring, and retinal chips, of course. And I like this picture because this is Inject Sense's biosensor. Can you guys pick out the device itself? Sorry, there you go. So there's a quarter, there's a grain of rice, and then there's the implant. I hope I don't leave meeting. Okay, good. All right, so retinal chips. We are all familiar with Second Sight and the Argus 2 implant. This is an electrode that sits on the retina. The theory behind this is that the patient wears these glasses that take a video of the environment, sends a signal back through the electrodes which are implanted to go up to the brain and tell the brain what you're seeing, right? Simple. Why didn't it take off? Because it is really cool technology. My thought is this really helped a very small subset of people. It was patients with retinitis pigmentosa. And in the business world, that is not the strongest value prop. And unfortunately, and it's an important one, but we need to start thinking about things that help, I think, a greater chunk of the population. It's also very technically difficult. Not a lot of people can do it. We do it at Bascom Palmer, but again, it is technically difficult. So it never really got too mainstream. I did think something was interesting here, though. I'm pretty sure we must have some Star Trek fans out here, and I certainly am. So there is an episode that I found in Star Trek that explains how Geordi sees with his goggles. And it's pretty amazing, actually, because it says that he has electrodes that are implanted in his retina that go to the brain and tell him what he's seeing. And I think it's incredible because Star Trek was so ahead of its time. But that's the same theory that the Argus 2 was using. Now, Pixium, we're going to target something that's a lot more mainstream, like geographic atrophy from macular degeneration. So you can see their chip here. And this is a really nice picture of an OCT showing the chip implanted underneath it. Now, going back to Second Sight, they decided to go straight to the brain, to the visual cortex. And this is what they're focused on now. That leads us to some very big companies that are emerging in this space. And I wanted to spend a moment just to talk about these. Kernel has a non-invasive helmet, which is covered in sensors. There's two types of things that it does. Number one, it measures blood flow. Number two, it measures electromagnetic activity, because going back to what we learned before, every time a neuron fires, there is a signal generated that can be measured. And this is a wearable, mobile, think of it like an fMRI that you wear on your head. And they've even thought of the business model, which is they want to sell neuroscience as a service. So just like you have like software as a service, now you can have neuroscience as a service too, so that multiple institutions can, log in and share that data amongst themselves, brain data. I think it's super interesting and powerful. In fact, I sent in a proposal to get one of the first 50 kernel devices for Bascom Palmer. We'll see how that goes, fingers crossed. Going to Facebook, they acquired Control Labs about a year ago or so, and that company deciphers neural intent. What do we mean by that? Facebook is using their optical imaging software on the Oculus device to read signals that you're thinking, okay, from the neurons firing in your brain and then translating them to code going back to your computer. So this is mind control of your keyboard. Think of it that way. And I'm sure you can all imagine what they're going to be using that for. So that leads us to Neuralink. Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, it's his latest baby, is a little bit different because this is an implantable implant, and this is subcranial. So he is proposing that we use a burr hole for a chip to sit on the cortex. We all know everything he touches turns to gold most of the time, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what they have here. In fact, they have FDA breakthrough device testing clearance as well, so we'll see where that goes. Interestingly enough, the battery life is all day, and you charge your chip, your brain chip, just like you would charge your Apple Watch. It's wireless charging. Elon Musk thinks that machines will rise and take over everything. So he tweeted this out. Nobody's sure if he's kidding or not, but the Neuralink mission statement is, if you can't beat them, join them. Very funny. All right, so going back to ophthalmology specifically, what types of things can we do with this technology? So we have some really broad things like glaucoma, ocular pain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and vascular dementia. These are not pie-in-the-sky ideas. These are things we're working on at Bascom Palmer and other institutions around the world. And I think basically anything that involves the eye-brain connectome, you can measure. Because remember, that's what we said. Anything you can measure, you can control. So that's a theory behind all of this. If you look down here to the bottom right, what you see is really interesting. This is an fMRI of a patient with glaucoma. So there's a healthy control, early glaucoma, and advanced glaucoma. Can you see the signal attenuation? So the hypothesis here, our hypothesis, is that if a patient has glaucoma, you should be able to see the signal deteriorating depending on what stage they're in. So mild, moderate, and severe. In patients with severe glaucoma, they really do have signal attenuation. And imagine this is a great way to gauge and diagnose and follow glaucoma patients. Very revolutionary. Okay, so what are some of the medical things that we can do with a brain-machine interface? Well, we can treat deafness. We can allow a paralyzed person to walk again, give grandma her memories back, cure depression, chronic pain, detect seizures, and suppress them. There's a really interesting company called NeuroPace that does this. It's sort of like a pacemaker for the brain. So it detects brain activity, and the algorithm picks up when there's aberrant brain activity, but then it also controls it. So this is another example, just like Hiru, of a piece of technology that has both diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities to suppress the seizure in this case. So NeuroPace is a great company to look at too. And then of course we can eliminate tremors. So I wanted to play this video. I think it's really powerful. It's like a minute and a half, but it's a great video that I'd like everyone to watch.
Without the stimulator on, the tremor is quite pronounced.
You can see the difference. With the click of a controller, Roger can turn the electrodes on and off.
And that's as smooth of a bow as I can play right now.
But when it's on, Roger's mastery of the violin is absolutely clear.
I remain very, very thankful every day that I have had the opportunity to have had this surgery.
Guys, this is why we do what we do. This is what all the sleepless nights are for, to treat patients like this. So now that we're all, thinking about all the medical things that we can do, I wanted us to have a little bit of fun. This is the last slide, but let's think about the cool stuff that we can do with the brain-machine interface. This is stuff in the future that will one day maybe be our lives, okay? So imagine you program yourself to fall asleep and then wake up wide awake at 7 a.m. You think about turning on the TV and it turns on. You think about wanting coffee and your connected coffee maker makes it for you. You drive your Tesla with your mind. It's not too far off. You stub your toe running into work, but no problem. You can just dial down the pain. You can upload the Will's Eye manuals straight to your brain. And if you're stuck at work, but your best friend is at the beach, you can share the beach day. You can see the waves, smell the ocean, hear the seagulls, and feel the sun on your face. And then last but certainly not least, because this is everyone's favorite, you can enjoy a huge chocolate cake right before bed and never gain an ounce. Because it's actually just the neural sensation that the chocolate cake gives you, not the chocolate cake itself, that gives you all that enjoyment. So you could feasibly eat a piece of broccoli, but your neural implant will make you think that you're eating a big piece of chocolate cake instead. Everyone loves that. And of course, you can extrapolate that to anything else you can think of. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And I appreciate everyone's time and attention here. Back to you, Gil.